The boardroom air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. As Elena placed the master key ring on the polished mahogany table, it landed with a soft clink that echoed louder than any shout could. Across from her sat Victoria Hale, the new CEO, her father's golden child, fresh from an Ivy League MBA and oblivious to the sweat that had built this empire. Victoria's manicured finger pointed like a dagger. Hand over all company assets. Security will escort you out. No hello. No explanation. Just cold dismissal after Elena's 20 years of holding Hale Tech together through floods, blackouts, and every glitch in between. Elena didn't flinch. She simply nodded, her face a mask of quiet resolve, and slid the keys forward. The lawyer beside Victoria, a slick suit named Harlan, reached for them casually at first. Then his eyes caught the engraved tag, Master Access Protocol, Clause 82B. His hand froze midair, color draining from his cheeks as if he'd touched a live wire. He leaned toward Victoria, whispering urgently, but she waved him off with a scoff. What's the problem? It's just keys. But Elena knew better. Those weren't just keys. They were the veins of the building, the pulse of every secure door, server room, and vault in Hale Tech's sprawling Silicon Valley campus. And Clause 82B? That was the trap she'd helped design years ago. A safeguard buried in the company's foundational charter, born from Old Man Hale's paranoia after a near-hostile takeover. It decreed that any forced handover of master access during termination, without board approval, locked down the entire facility. No overrides. No quick fixes. Just a regulatory glacier that froze everything until the board thawed it. Elena had been there when it was written, her fingerprints on every line, ensuring it protected the lifers like her from exactly this kind of entitled purge. As Harlan's whispers grew frantic, Victoria's posture cracked, just a flicker. But Elena saw it. The room's hum of fluorescent lights seemed to amplify the silence, each second stretching like taffy. Elena stood there, hands now empty, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders even as it settled on theirs. She remembered the day old Hale had handed her those keys personally, after she'd pulled a 72-hour shift rerouting power during a storm that nearly wiped out the data center. You're the backbone, Elena, he'd said, his voice gravelly, with respect. Don't let anyone forget that. Victoria, barely out of college back then, had been off skiing in Aspen. Now here she was, playing queen, unaware she'd just crowned Elena the executioner. Harlan finally spoke aloud, his voice a controlled tremor. MS. Hale. This triggers a compliance hold. The clause, it's active. We need board sign-off before any transfer. Victoria's eyes narrowed, confusion twisting into annoyance. Then get it. What's the big deal? But the big deal was unfolding in real time. Deep in the system Elena had architected, alerts were firing like silent fireworks. Access logs flagged the handover as unauthorized. Badge readers across the campus began to stutter, denying entry to restricted zones. The HVAC controls in the server farms paused their cycles, a precautionary measure to prevent tampering during a breach. Elena didn't need to see it. She felt it in her bones, the way a mechanic knows an engine's cough before it seizes. She gave Victoria a small, almost sympathetic nod, not gloating, just acknowledging the shift, and turned toward the door. Security stood there, two burly guys in ill-fitting uniforms, but they hesitated when she approached. Harlan barked something about holding her, but Elena kept walking, her steps measured, echoing down the hall. Behind her, Victoria's voice rose, sharp and demanding answers that no one had. By the time Elena reached her car, in the underground lot, her phone buzzed with the first mirrored alert, a private feed she'd set up years ago, air-gapped and forgotten by everyone but her. Facility lockdown initiated. Clause 82B. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against her back, and let out a slow breath. The campus above her was already grinding to a halt, but subtly, like a heart murmur before the attack. Elevators would glitch on non-essential floors. Vault doors would require manual overrides that only she knew how to bypass without tripping more alarms. And the board, they'd be notified automatically. A relic protocol from the days when Hale Tech was just a startup in a garage. Not this behemoth valued at billions. Elena started the engine, pulling out into the California sun, the Silicon Valley skyline shrinking in her rearview. She'd seen this coming months ago, when whispers of Victoria's ascension started. That's why she'd quietly founded Apex Safeguards, her consulting firm, specializing in exactly these kinds of infrastructure transitions. No fanfare, just preparation. As she merged onto the freeway, another alert pinged. Audit trail activated. Insurance protocols suspended. Victoria's grand leadership refresh was about to become a nightmare seminar in humility. Elena didn't smile. Not yet. But the tension that had coiled in her chest for weeks began to unwind, thread by thread, as the miles ticked by. That afternoon, back at Hale Tech, the cracks widened. The IT team tried to push a routine software update to the security grid, only to hit a wall. Access denied, pending asset transfer verification. Fingers flew over keyboards. Calls bounced between departments. Facilities reported flickering lights in the East Wing, a side effect of the power reroute safeguards kicking in. Victoria paced her office, her father's old space, now stripped of his cluttered blueprints and replaced with minimalist art, barking orders into her phone. Fix it. What do you mean it's locked? Harlan, sweating through his shirt, explained again. The clause treated the keys as contested property, invalidating any changes until the board voted. And the board? They were scattered, some in New York, others golfing in Scottsdale, unaware yet that their inboxes held a bombshell. By evening, the first board member called, voice laced with irritation. What the hell is this about a facility freeze? Victoria stammered through excuses, blaming outdated policies. But the damage was seeping. Investors, sniffing trouble, started pinging for updates on the upcoming expansion announcement. Hale Tech's stock dipped 0.5% by close. Nothing catastrophic, but a whisper of vulnerability in a market that devoured weakness. Elena, meanwhile, sat in her modest home office in San Jose, sipping herbal tea, watching the mirrored dashboard light up like a Christmas tree. She didn't intervene. Why should she? They'd fired the one person who could have prevented this. All because Victoria saw her as legacy deadweight. The irony burned slow and sweet. As night fell, Elena drafted a simple email to her new firm's secure server. Initiate consultation protocol. Apex was ready. Hale Tech wasn't. The next morning brought the first real explosion. A vendor truck arrived at the loading dock for a scheduled server upgrade, but the gates wouldn't open. The driver honked. Guards shrugged. Badges failed. Overrides looped back to the clause. Inside, panic rippled through the halls. Meetings devolved into finger-pointing. HR blamed legal for not catching it. Legal blamed facilities for not flagging the key's significance. Victoria, red-eyed from a sleepless night, convened an emergency huddle. How do we unlock this? She demanded. Harlan spread out the charter documents, pointing to Clause 82B's fine print. We need unanimous board approval or the original holder's release. All eyes turned to the empty chair where Elena might have sat. Someone muttered, we should have made her resign. Too late. The board conference call that afternoon was brutal. Old Hale's longtime allies grilled Victoria. You terminated without review? In a transition year? She defended her bold vision, but her voice cracked under the scrutiny. By midday, The freeze had halted a critical data migration, delaying client deliverables worth millions. Whispers of lawsuits from partners circulated. Elena fielded her first call from a board contact, an old friend of her late boss. "This is a mess.
Elena,
Can you help?" She paused, letting the silence build. Apex Safeguards can consult, but terms apply.
he sighed.
Knowing the price. As the day wore on, the building itself seemed to rebel. Air conditioning in the executive suites faltered, a safety measure tied to the protocol. Victoria stared out her window. The empire her father built, now a cage of her own making. Elena, across town, felt the D-dam of emotions break, a mix of vindication and sorrow for what could have been. But mostly, resolve. This wasn't revenge. It was the system working as designed. The board's virtual meeting dragged into the evening, screens flickering with faces etched in frustration. Victoria sat at the head of the empty boardroom table, her usual poise fraying like cheap thread. "It's an archaic rule," she argued, her voice pitching higher. "We can amend it retroactively." But the chairman, a grizzled veteran from Hale's early days, shook his head. "Clause 82B isn't just policy, it's woven into our insurance and SEC filings. Touch it now, and we invite audits." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the call. One director, a sharp-eyed woman from finance,
Leaned in.
"Who drafted this anyway?" Silence. Then Harlan cleared his throat. Elena Ramirez was involved. She was the infrastructure lead at the time. Victoria's jaw tightened. Of course it was her. The woman she dismissed as obsolete had embedded herself in the company's DNA. As the meeting adjourned with no resolution, only a directive to contain the exposure, Victoria slammed her laptop shut. Down the hall, teams scrambled. Engineers jury-rigged temporary access for low-level systems. But the core vaults remained sealed, holding blueprints,
Contracts.
and prototypes worth fortunes. A junior tech whispered to his colleague, "It's like the building's haunted." Not haunted. Elena would have said protected. From her home, she monitored the chaos, each alert a validation of her foresight. She'd built those redundancies not for glory, but for survival, knowing empires rise and fall on overlooked details. By week 2, the freeze had morphed into a stranglehold. HaleTech's expansion webcast, Victoria's big debut, touting new AI-driven campuses, was postponed indefinitely. Press releases cited technical adjustments, but rumors leaked to tech blogs. Internal lockdown at HaleTech. CEO's first move backfires? Stock dipped another 2 points. Investors clamoring for clarity. Victoria fielded calls from anxious shareholders, her assurances ringing hollow. "We're resolving it swiftly." But swiftly wasn't in the cards. The board demanded a full report, and Harlan's team uncovered more. The clause linked to liability insurance, voiding coverage during any unresolved asset dispute. One fire in the server room now, and they'd be uninsured for billions.
Panic set in.
Facilities tried reprogramming locks, only to trigger more alarms. Secondary protocols Elena had layered in, like tripwires in a vault. "Who knows this system inside out?" someone asked in a frantic Slack thread. The answer echoed unspoken. "The woman you fired." Victoria finally cracked, alone in her office, staring at her father's portrait. Tears welled, not from regret, but fury at being outmaneuvered by a nobody. She grabbed her phone, dialing Harlan. Get her back. Offer whatever. But Elena wasn't taking calls. Apex Safeguards responded instead, a formal proposal for transition consulting, outlining fees tied to downtime losses. Victoria balked at the number, 7 figures, but the board overruled. Pay it, or explain to the SEC why our assets are in limbo. Elena met them at a neutral coffee shop in Palo Alto. not the campus. Harlan arrived first. Flustered, papers in hand. Victoria followed. Her designer's suit rumpled, eyes shadowed.
No pleasantries.
What do you want? Victoria spat. Elena sipped her latte, calm as a still pond. Resolution. Per the clause. Harlan slid over documents. Board approval for key reissuance. A release form. Elena scanned them, her mind flashing back to late nights drafting with old Hale. This protects the company, he'd said. From fools like my daughter might become. She signed. But with addendums, Apex would oversee all future transitions, embedding her firm as a permanent advisor. Victoria signed too, her hand shaking. As Elena left, she felt the explosion of release, not joy, but closure. The keys were handed back symbolically, but the power? That stayed with her. Back at Hale Tech, systems thawed slowly, like ice melting under spring sun. But scars remained, delayed projects, eroded trust. Victoria's refresh stalled, her authority undermined. Whispers in the halls. Elena's ghost still runs this place. Elena, at Apex, fielded new clients, other firms wary of similar pitfalls. The experience had forged her, turning dismissal into dominion. The fallout lingered like smoke after fire. 3 weeks post-resolution, Hale Tech's quarterly report glossed over the minor operational hiccup, but insiders knew better. Victoria's initiatives were scaled back. The board installed oversight committees, subtly clipping her wings. She attended meetings with a forced smile, but the spark was dimmed. Elena, meanwhile, expanded Apex, hiring former colleagues disillusioned by the purge. One evening, as she reviewed a new contract, her phone rang an unknown number. It was Victoria. Why? She asked, voice raw. Why build that trap? Elena paused, the rhythm of her breath steady. It wasn't a trap. It was insurance. For people like me, who build what you inherit. Silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Victoria hung up without another word. Elena set the phone down, the emotional weight settling into quiet reflection. Had she gone too far? Or just far enough to remind them that foundations matter more than facades? Months passed, the incident fading into corporate lore. Hale Tech stabilized, but with Apex's invisible hand guiding. Elena walked the campus one last time, collecting a forgotten file from the archives. The air felt different, sterile, stripped of history. In the lobby, a new plaque gleamed, Apex Safeguards, Eternal Stewardship Partner. Subtle, but permanent. As she left, a young engineer nodded in respect. Thanks for saving us. Elena smiled faintly. It wasn't about saving, it was about remembering. The clause lived on, a whisper in the system, ensuring no one forgot again. Victoria's downfall unfolded not in a blaze, but in the slow drip of erosion, like water carving stone. After the clause's release, she clung to her title, but the board's trust had fractured. Meetings grew terse, her proposals met with probing questions she couldn't answer without referencing Elena's old notes. Have we consulted Apex on this? Became a refrain, each utterance a needle in her pride. She pushed harder, announcing a digital transformation to phase out physical keys entirely, smart cards, biometrics, AI oversight. But the pilots failed spectacularly. Glitches in the beta rollout locked out an entire wing during a demo for investors. Laughter turned to gasps as doors refused to budge. Echoes of Clause 82B, someone muttered. Victoria's face burned, the humiliation coiling in her gut. She fired the project lead, but the damage stuck. Stock analysts downgraded Hale Tech, citing leadership instability. Whispers reached her. She's not her father. The comparison stung. a constant shadow. One night, alone with a glass of wine, she scrolled through old emails, finding one from Elena years back, detailed warnings about over-relying on tech without human backups. Victoria had ignored it then.
Now.
It read like prophecy. Elena's life at Apex bloomed in contrast. Her firm secured contracts with rivals, her reputation as the clause whisperer spreading in hushed boardroom tales. She hired a team of engineers, lawyers, psychologists to dissect corporate infrastructures, preventing similar meltdowns. But success carried its own weight. Late nights, she pondered the human cost, families disrupted by the freeze, careers stalled. Was vindication worth the chaos? A moral fog settled, but she pushed through, channeling it into better safeguards. One client, a biotech startup, praised her. "You see the people behind the protocols." Elena nodded, but inside, the explosion of her own firing replayed, the betrayal's sting fueling her drive. Back at Hale Tech, the board convened without Victoria for the first time. "She's a liability," the chairman said. Evidence mounted, emails showing she'd bypassed reviews, logs of her dismissive responses to warnings. Harlan presented the dossier, his voice steady but regretful. Clause 82B was the symptom. Arrogance was the disease. Votes tallied, her ouster was unanimous. Victoria learned via email. The subject line cold. Transition notification. She stared at her screen, the room spinning. No keys to hand over this time, just her badge. Slid under the door like an afterthought. The handover meeting was clinical, a far cry from Elena's dramatic exit. Victoria sat flanked by lawyers, signing NDAs and severance terms. The board offered a mutual parting, spin for her failure. She accepted. Numb. The emotional dam bursting in private tears later. Packing her office, she found a faded photo, her with her father at Hale Tech's groundbreaking. "Build on strength," he'd inscribed. She'd built on ego instead. As she left, security escorted her, irony's cruel twist. Elena heard, through channels, feeling no triumph, only a haunting echo. What drives us to destroy what we inherit? Apex thrived, but Elena instituted ethics reviews for consultations, ensuring her work healed more than harmed. Victoria relocated to New York, starting a small venture fund. Humbled, wiser. Their paths crossed once at a conference. Eyes met. A nod exchanged, no words. Just shared understanding of power's fragility. Hale Tech rebounded under interim leadership, with Apex embedded as a core partner. Elena visited for a routine audit, the campus buzzing with renewed energy. In the boardroom, her name appeared in the advisory ledger, not engraved, but digital, enduring. As she left, the system pinged, access verified, clause secure. A small victory, but profound. The story lingered in her mind, a moral quandary. In protecting ourselves, do we become the very traps we fear? As seasons turned, the ripple effects of Clause 82B deepened, weaving into Hale Tech's culture like roots under soil. New hires underwent infrastructure legacy training, a module Elena designed through Apex, emphasizing respect for foundational systems. Buildings have memories, she'd lecture via video. Ignore them at your peril. Victoria, in her New York exile, rebuilt slowly. Her fund focused on female-led startups, channeling her pain into empowerment. Therapy sessions unpacked her arrogance, revealing insecurities from living in her father's shadow. "I thought control was conquest," she confessed. "It's collaboration." A chance article on Hale Tech's recovery mentioned Apex glowingly. Victoria paused, a mix of resentment and admiration stirring. She emailed Elena anonymously. "Well played." Elena recognized the IP, replying simply, "Lessons learned." No explosion, just quiet acknowledgement. At Apex, Elena faced her own crossroads, a massive offer to sell the firm. Tempting, but it echoed Victoria's shortcuts. She declined, prioritizing integrity over instant wealth. Her team grew.
Diverse voices enriching protocols.
One evening, mentoring a young engineer, she shared her story, not for drama, but wisdom. Power isn't held, it's shared wisely. HaleTech's annual report dedicated a section to resilience protocols, crediting external advisors. The board engraved a subtle tribute in the lobby, "Guardians of the Core." Elena saw it during a site visit, emotion welling, a validation not sought, but earned. But doubts haunted. Had the clause caused unnecessary suffering? Laid off staff during the freeze? Strained families? She donated anonymously to affected employees, seeking balance. Victoria's fund succeeded modestly. At a panel, she spoke candidly. "My biggest failure taught me humility." Audiences applauded, her vulnerability resonating. Paths converged at a tech summit. They shared a coffee, conversation flowing tentatively. "I underestimated you," Victoria admitted. Elena smiled softly. "We all underestimate foundations." Laughter broke tension. A bridge formed from ruins. The encounter left Elena reflective. Conflict births growth. But at what cost? Years later, HaleTech stood as a beacon of innovation. Clause 82 be evolved into a modern framework co-authored by Apex. Elena retired partially, writing a book on corporate stewardship, anonymous. Of course, Victoria's fund flourished, mentoring the next generation. Their story became legend in Silicon Valley circles, a cautionary tale of hubris and resilience. Elena, walking her garden, pondered the lingering question. In the dance of power, who truly wins? The one who builds, or the one who learns? The ambiguity haunted, a moral echo inviting endless reflection.